Rabid excited me because I got to put a whole city in peril, you know. By the nature of it, it was painted on a bigger canvas than Shivers. There were many similarities because it also involved a disease that spread from person to person and that made the people who were infected be quite deranged. It was really much more of an action picture in that sense. I mean, I had to deal with large numbers of people, military vehicles, crashed motorcycles, all kinds of things. And it was my initiation into that level of filmmaking. And that's really what it felt like to me.
Should have never sold the station wagon.
Christ, Bob.
Christ.
It was also interesting to have a lead character who was a woman, because things haven't really changed much, I have to say. I mean, it's a difficult sell to sell a movie with a woman as the lead, especially if it's a genre picture. I initially wanted Sissy Spacek to play the lead of Rabid. I had just seen her in Badlands, Terrence Malick's film, and I thought she was fantastic. And I was discouraged because A, she had a Texas accent, and B, she had a lot of freckles. This seemed to be the problem that various people at Cinepix had with her. Of course, this was before Carrie and made her a big genre star. But the suggestion came to me that we needed a name for the movie, but that we really couldn't afford a name. And I understood from my experience at the Cannes Film Festival at the film market, that there were thousands of films out there that you'd never heard of and never would hear of. And I could understand that in order to make a film buyer for some country come to see your movie, to buy it for distribution for Poland or for Bulgaria or God knows where, that you had to have some draw in the movie. Often that was an actor, but of course on a low budget, what actor could you get that would mean anything? So Ivan Reitman, who later did move to Hollywood and became a very successful producer and director there, suggested to me that we get Marilyn Chambers. Now, Marilyn Chambers was the most famous porn star of her time. She might be on the pantheon of porn stars. She might be up there with the top 3 or 4. And because apparently there was some understanding that she really wanted to try and do a non-porno film. She wanted to do a legitimate film. Of course, it tickled me to think that someone thought my film was going to be a legitimate film. That was very good. So the ironic thing is I have still never seen her in her famous porn movies. Behind the Green Door, I think, was the most famous one. I've never seen it. What I did see was a very early kind of naive sort of softcore movie that she did. And I could see that she would work physically for the role because the whole thing about Marilyn was she was the girl next door. She wasn't some tarted up slut. She was blonde and beautiful and sweet and naive, but she would do all these sexual things. So I was told, audition her, and if you don't like her, we won't use her. The pressure isn't there. It would be great if we had her, but if you really think she can't do it, forget it. And so she came to Montreal. And she auditioned, and she was terrific. I thought she was great. So I thought, well, this is perfect. We'll use Marilyn. And as it turned out, she worked really well in the movie. She actually got quite good notices for it, and never seemed to have done another legitimate film again in her life. And I have no idea why.
I'm so glad I ran into you.
Well, I think I better be getting out now. I'm getting all wrinkly.
Oh, no, not yet. You haven't even told me your name.
Judy Glassberg.
One is not necessarily totally in control of one's metaphor when making a movie. You find that it seems right, and you're not necessarily able to articulate why it is right. Certainly, the premise of Rabid is outrageous on a certain level, and it really basically is a woman is injured in a motorcycle crash. She's taken to a cosmetic surgery clinic because it's the nearest available place that can do surgery, and she's given skin grafts to repair her damaged skin, and as a result, she develops this strange organ that in her armpit. Now, see, it sounds ridiculous as I'm saying it, which is a kind of vampiric organ. It's actually used to suck blood. Now, there was a time when I was making this movie, and I said to my producers, this makes no sense at all. This cannot work. It's completely ridiculous. There's always these moments when your project can fall down around you like a house of cards. I mean, suddenly the magic isn't there and you don't believe it anymore. He convinced me. He said, no, it's really got something. The imagery is really powerful and it will work. This was John Dunning, the head of Cinepix. And so I went and made the movie, and basically that is the plot. I mean, the woman is forced to suck blood through this organ in order to survive. So there's the element of vampirism, but with none of the trappings of what we normally think of as vampirism, with the added element that's somewhat Shivers-esque, that she is, unbeknownst to her, passing a disease into the people that she takes blood from. And they in turn run amok and pass the disease on to other people, and they become, in a way, rabid, or rabid as you would say. They become infected, and they bite people, and they infect them, and they froth at the mouth and do terrible things, to the point where the whole city is under siege from these crazies, and people have to do. Now, it was seen very much at the time as a political metaphor, because the only time that we had ever seen soldiers in the streets of a Canadian city was during the FLQ crisis, the Front Libération de Québec. This was an attempt to quell what was seen as a terrorist group that wanted separation for Quebec. And our then Prime Minister Trudeau actually called the troops out into the streets, and martial law was declared, and this was very traumatizing for Canadians who are not used to seeing guns in the street in any form, or certainly then in particular weren't. And in this movie, I have those soldiers and those guns out in the street. So there was a political undertone to it, and because of course we were shooting in Montreal with many Quebec crew members. Whether that metaphor will ever hold up anywhere else or later is another question. What people saw it as was a kind of a metaphor for AIDS, or later on, or for the spreading of various viruses. Whether they were talking about the spreading of the virus of Cronenberg filmmaking, I'm not sure. Maybe somebody's going to propose that. But in terms of your own personal interpretation and whether or not the film strikes you as scary or ridiculous, well, I'll leave it up to you. For me, all art is subversive in some way, and that means that it cannot possibly abide by the sort of the rules of politeness and decorum that many mainstream movies thrive on. I mean, most mainstream movies are comfort. It's a cinema of comfort. It's meant to make you feel good and feel cozy, even if it's got some scary moments in it. Everything resolves okay, and it's really just there to reinforce the status quo and get you out of your own life a little bit for a few minutes. To me, that's not what art does. Art is reflective. It really forces you to reflect on yourself, on your situation, good or bad, make you think about things like what is human existence, what is the human condition really about, and so on and so on. So I think that real art must be subversive of the status quo to some extent. It doesn't mean that you're preaching political revolution necessarily, although that would be a possibility. So it's inevitable then, if you consider yourself an artist, that you are going to bother people, that you're going to disturb people, and that you're going to knock over a few walls. And I think even if that's not your main delight, as it is not really with me. I mean, my main delight, I think I'm very playful. I think playfulness is the main thing that I do. I play with the concepts, with the images, with the connections between things, the metaphors. And so I think I'm playful, not sort of hostile and nasty. But nonetheless, there's an urge to get under the surface of things. Sometimes I do that literally. I mean, I'm doing scenes of sort of autopsy and dissection and surgery. And yeah, you want to get under the surface to see what's really going on and how things really work. That does upset a lot of people. And to me, then it's an inevitable consequence of being a serious artist. When you find the look of the movie, the tone of the movie, the feel of it, it's a process that's ongoing. It's not suddenly one day you wake up and it's there, because it's delivered to the audience in many, many details. The color of walls and the shading of the light, the clothes that you use or don't use. And I mean, each movie has its own very specific little set of rules that it kind of generates. In a way, you're in each movie you're creating a biosphere that has to be complete in itself. It has its own weather system, it has its own ecology, and if there's something not functioning properly there, then the movie doesn't work. So to me, each movie is different because it has different demands. It makes different demands to make that work. But of course, the continuity comes from me and my sensibility, and then the sensibilities of those people that I work with and choose to work with continually. So I'm sure that that's where a lot of that comes from. It's a contribution of a lot of people.